Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here today. The name of the speech is the state of the province. And it could be a reasonably short speech, because I think it's fair to say that the state of Saskatchewan, in a word, is strong. You don't have to take it from a politician. You can take it from others who are expert in measuring these things. Standard & Poor's was already referenced. They continue to say that we are among the most creditworthy jurisdictions in Canada. And while that's referencing the government, I think it's an important indicator of the overall health of our economy, of the finances. 3 years ago, S&P awarded us that AAA credit rating. We joined Alberta and British Columbia as the only provinces to have that credit rating. And every year since, they have affirmed that AAA credit rating because of our, quote, low tax supported debt, strong economy, and robust liquidity. And then just this September, Moody's, the other major bond rating agency, weighed in, and they gave us an upgrade to AAA as well. It's their highest rating. Moody's said the upgrade, quote, reflects the province's fiscal discipline and sustained low debt levels, which underscores prudent financial management practices. Earlier this year, BMO issued a report stating that Saskatchewan's economy continues to perform well because of our diverse, now listen to this, because of our diverse resource and agricultural sectors. And we'll get into this in a moment, but for those of us who are watching the price of West Texas, and we've been doing that in government, and Ken Kravets has been doing that on a regular basis as the finance minister, this is a very important acknowledgement from a chartered bank in the country. Because of our diverse resource and agricultural sector and sound finances, the bank official went on to say, Saskatchewan remains one of the country's leading economies, and our commercial customers continue to benefit from the growth. A recent national survey completed by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says businesses in our province are most likely to report confidence in their province and in the government that it would have a small business-friendly vision. The Fraser Institute recently released its Global Petroleum Survey. Saskatchewan ranked, it's a global survey now, ladies and gentlemen, so this is Earth, and Saskatchewan has ranked third in terms of being the most attractive place in the world for oil and gas investment, and I believe #1 in the country. The rankings are based on things like the tax environment, the regulatory environment, the regulatory burden, as it were, for those who are entrepreneurs, and some certainty around environmental regulations. The survey's director was Kenneth Green, and he said, quote, Saskatchewan ranks well on most of those factors, and that's what drives them upwards in the ranking. Last week, the Fraser Institute issued another report. It's not an economic report, but it speaks again to the strength of the province. Because you've heard me say, and those in government say, that we're not seeking economic growth and prosperity for its own end. We want it for the quality of life that will afford this current generation and future generations, including in the area of education and healthcare. Well, last week, the Fraser Institute issued this additional report on surgical wait times in Canada. And one of the authors of the report admitted to our provincial media that he was surprised. He reran the numbers because he couldn't believe how the wait lists had shortened in Saskatchewan. We're now #2 in the country when it comes to wait times from referral to treatment, and he attributed the progress in Saskatchewan to our Saskatchewan Surgical Initiative and the fact that we have boosted capacity by involving private clinics in the system to help reduce the wait list, to help ensure people get timely surgery. Part of that success story, by the way, in addition to the private clinics, has been, I'm going to say it, the use of lean in the healthcare system so we can have improved patient focus and care and timeliness in healthcare. And by the way, we're going to continue doing that. So there's some extra provincial reports from places around the country. There are also statistics we could point to today in trying to answer the question as to exactly how goes the state of Saskatchewan in December of 2014. Well, economic forecasters continue to predict the economy will grow by about 2.8% in 2015. That will be the second fastest rate of growth amongst the provinces. We are on track to balance our budget, notwithstanding current challenges and volatility in the oil markets. We expect new records in exports and manufacturing shipments in 2014. Investment is expected in Saskatchewan to surpass again $20 billion in 2014. This would be the third consecutive year that it would achieve a greater than $20 billion threshold in investment in Saskatchewan. Most of it, by the way, is your investment. Most of it, by the way, is the private sector. Today, Saskatchewan has the lowest unemployment rate in the land at 3.5%. We've had the lowest unemployment rate in Canada for 23 consecutive months. We are creating jobs, you, not the government, you are creating jobs at a faster rate than any group of entrepreneurs in the Dominion of Canada. Regina has the lowest unemployment rate among major Canadian cities at 3.0%. Saskatoon is right behind, second lowest in the country, 4.4%. And with record people working in the province, the total Saskatchewan payroll, and these numbers can be quite staggering, the wages that you pay, assessed by our workers' compensation, have climbed by more than 50% since 2007. It's not that long ago, ladies and gentlemen, to see a 50% increase in the total payroll of the province of Saskatchewan. $20 billion a year now. You're doing better, I hope, as businesses. But you're also ensuring that your staff, your teams, your workers are doing better. Average weekly earnings are approaching $1,000. That's a record in our province, and it is the third highest in Canada. And this rising tide truly lifts every boat. Stats Canada reports it from 2006 to 2011. The average household income in Regina's north central area grew from $39,000 to $49,000. That's a 26% increase in terms of income in north central Regina. By any reasonable standard, by any fair metric, your Saskatchewan, the province you've been busy building for the last number of years, for the better part of the last decade, is strong. Our collective challenge, the business sector working together with government, is to keep it that way, to maintain the strength, to maintain the leadership momentum that we have in the province. There are some challenges on the horizon. There are some things that should focus our attention, and I want to discuss just a few of them here this afternoon. First and foremost, the drop in oil prices. Over the last few weeks, it's been precipitous. I think Friday was a $7 a barrel day. Black Friday meant something completely different in the United States than it did for the finance minister here today, and for those of us that are watching those numbers. There are some things that work in our favor, though, ladies and gentlemen, you should keep in mind when you watch the price fall and you're thinking, what's this doing to the provincial finances? For example, when the price of oil falls, what happens to the dollar? Typically, the dollar goes down. The reason for that is that Canada is increasingly an energy economy, something we should be proud of, by the way, and more on that in a moment. But because we are linked to the energy sector inextricably in some ways economically, as the price of oil falls, so does the dollar. We export all of the rest of our goods, including oil, in US dollars, and so there's a positive effect on the Treasury. In fact, here's the math, roughly speaking. For every dollar a barrel that the price would go up or down, if it were to be sustained over the year, over the entire year, it's worth about $18 to $20 million to the Treasury for every dollar a barrel of oil. With respect to the dollar, for every penny it might go up and down, if it's sustained on average over the year, it's about $25 to $30 million to the Treasury. So as it falls, that's to the good, and you can then see how a mitigating factor of falling oil prices on our budget is the fact that we have a lower dollar, and that helps the provincial budget. The other mitigating factor for us in Saskatchewan is the diversified economy. Not just in terms of a diversified resource base, because it's not just oil in Saskatchewan, it is potash and it is uranium, but also because of the diversified strength in the sectors of the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, you've created 70,000 new jobs since 2007. That's a staggering number. Here's something I think you'll find even more surprising. Less than 10% of those new jobs have come in the resource sector. Less than 10%. And some portion of that's been oil, and the rest of those resource sector jobs have been in mining and other resource extraction industries. So we have a diversified economy. We have a lower dollar that helps offset what's going to happen with respect to oil. Here's another point to make. In Saskatchewan, we've seen very recently, in our recent past, how the economy and the budget of the province could become uncoupled or delinked. I think typically people would think, look, if the economy is moving up, then the budget must be going up and vice versa. It's not always the case. Sometimes in our province, our revenues are perhaps stable, maybe even on a long-term decline in certain areas of revenue resource, and yet our economy continues to grow. We have a very recent example of how Saskatchewan has faced challenges similar to the ones, frankly, worse than the ones we're looking at today, and through that period continued economic momentum occurred here in your province. It was 2009, in fact, not that long ago. I remember in 2008, we were invited to speak at the first Energy Trust conference in New York. And so we went down there. It was a pretty good gig to be able to go and tell your story there early on in the life of a government. And on that occasion, on that trip, we also went over to the NYMEX, the Mercantile Exchange, and we rang the bell. Also pretty cool. And on that day, oil touched $134 a barrel, West Texas. So, we were feeling pretty proud of that. We thought, we must have had something to do with it, maybe some good luck. About 9 months later, maybe even less, I was looking at my iPad and watching oil hit $39 West Texas. $39 a barrel. In that year, what was also happening was that potash revenues were crashing. There were no sales. The year before, there had been record sales. Money that the province didn't expect. By the way, that's why we used to pay off a lot of that debt and invest in infrastructure. But potash sales were crashing back in 2009. In fact, I remember the finance minister at the time, Rod Gandafor, coming to me and meeting in the office and saying, well, you know how we're not really going to make any money off potash this year? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, it's actually worse. Because of an anomaly in our royalty system, we actually owe the potash companies money in this particular year. And I said, well, that really sucks. I mean, which is a very considered response. Here's what else was different about 2009 when we faced similar challenges. In 2009, remember, we were at the beginning of a worldwide economic slowdown. We didn't know where it would end or how severe it would be. We knew it was just going to be bad. In 2014, there's maybe some challenges with oil. But there should be some relative optimism about potash. Prices still aren't that strong, but unfortunately in Russia there's a mine that's flooded. That could be worth 4% of production. I was just in India, and there's obviously continued interest in all parts of the world in the potash we have, and there will be sales to be made. We also know that there's much greater attendant economic strength around the world today, including in the United States, showing some signs of life that should give us some hope. In addition to a diversified economy, in addition to the fact that the dollar is falling with the price of oil. So all of that to say, the next budget will be tough. It will be. There's no question about it. We will balance the budget, but it'll be difficult. But let us remember that we have faced even more severe challenges not very long ago. And do you know what happened through 2009, ladies and gentlemen? The GDP actually went down by 4%. But you created net jobs in the province. There were more jobs created in 2009 than the year before. Do you know what else happened? More people moved to Saskatchewan than were here the year before. You continued to grow in this province despite some more severe challenges that are, I would argue, were more severe than anything we face today. There are other challenges we need to be aware of, though, in terms of the state of our province today, economically speaking. And most of this speech is about the economy. I think you've heard me, many of you have heard me say many times before that that's the starting point for the government. We'll always focus on the growth agenda. We're going to focus on the economy because on the strength of a broader tax base, on the strength of a growing economy, that is the only way to sustain better social programs and healthcare investments, the only way to make infrastructure investment or build schools. So forgive me again, but we're going to focus in terms of the state of the province on the health of the economy, its strength today, and some challenges that we face. The challenge that we need to be focused on in terms of the province's trade opportunities is not internationally, ironically. The challenges that we face with respect to trade and even procurement is found within Canada. We have noted over the last little while some provinces moving towards what I would argue and have argued is protectionism in things like procurement. We have made the case that Saskatchewan are free traders. We want to continue to be free traders, but we also will be wanting to protect our industry if these procurement practices are maintained in the long term in other jurisdictions. In the last cabinet shuffle, we established a new entity called Priority Saskatchewan. Gord Wyant is the minister of that. The point of Priority Saskatchewan is to determine what other provinces are doing in procurement, listen to our companies, not just in the steel industry, but others in the construction industry, so we can hear from them on the issues of procurement and find out whether there really is or is not a level playing field. I think we're going to have those recommendations to the government here early in the new year, but I've sort of seen the early reviews of those recommendations, and I can tell you that if those reviews hold up, I have concerns about a level playing field for our companies in this province, given the practices that we see in some other parts of Canada. And while we will always advocate for free trade and open procurement, if it's just not likely to happen, then we're going to respond in kind. Then we're going to do what we can to level the playing field to make sure that you can compete evenly, fair and square with companies, steel providers, contractors from all over the country. We'll always work towards their elimination, but in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, we can't be Boy Scouts about it. We have to make sure that there's fairness for you, for our private sector in Saskatchewan. There are also challenges that have manifested themselves in the last little while with respect to the transportation of what we do best. And we do energy and food best. We do many other things, but we do these other things prolifically. With respect to the food transportation issue, we saw what happened in 2013 when there was a bit of a perfect storm in terms of the winter being as cold as it was, in terms of the record crop that was harvested here. We lost Japan as a customer of our wheat, ladies and gentlemen, because we couldn't provide them timely shipments. That's how serious this is. The General Mills factory reported they were only 17 days away, this was last year, from shutting down the Cheerios factory because they couldn't get the oats they needed because of logistical problems. I'm talking Cheerios, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious. When we're in Toronto and we're in Ottawa, we're trying to explain how serious this is, and so we do talk a lot about wheat, but we go right to Cheerios. So I hope we provided some leadership through Lowell Stewart, the Ag Minister, and I know I was down in Ottawa. We were meeting with the federal government. We had a receptive federal government that wanted to do some interim things to ensure we could continue to move our products, to make sure there was accountability by the rail companies, and that act has happened, by the way, and I hear the federal minister is going to be extending some of its provisions so that we can ensure that the product's moving. We'll work to continue to provide that leadership. We must, so that our reputation around the world remains one of a timely, an on-time provider of great high-quality food. We will also, though, contribute to the review going on today. Murad Al-Khatib, that you all know, is involved in the review of the Canadian Transportation Act. This is our chance to make long-term, more systemic improvements to the system, and we'll be a part of that. And finally, we're going to do things like we did just last month. In Saskatchewan, we hosted the New West Partnership. Many of you will know the New West Partnership really is the name of the three Western provinces when we get together on interprovincial trade issues and cooperative efforts. While we hosted a meeting, Premier Prentice and Premier Clark were here in Regina, and all of the stakeholders in the transportation industry with a view to a couple things. One, a short-term plan, which I think we came up with, called the Peak Protocol. How do we deal with perfect storms in the future so we can do a better job of moving the product? And finally, some thoughts on the long-term solution. The long-term solution involves some additional infrastructure investment in transportation. We've made that case already to the federal government, the three Western provinces, and we're hopeful that we're going to see that investment come back for what we're calling an Asia-Pacific Gateway 2, so that we can ensure that the infrastructure we have will meet the needs of a province that wants to move more food and more energy and create more wealth here at home to the benefit of our province, but also to the benefit of Canada. More recently, very recently, there has been another challenge emerge with respect to the transportation of goods from Western Canada. It's the Energy East pipeline. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this if you don't mind. It's very important that we know the facts about this pipeline and that we contact, frankly, friends and relatives and maybe strangers, just cold calls of people in Ontario and Quebec and explain to them some of this stuff, because we want them to contact their politicians and their premiers so they have all of the information. We can provide some names of random people in those provinces if you're interested. The government of Saskatchewan doesn't get for you what you should get for your oil. It never has. You deserve the world price for your oil. It's your resource, by the way. It's not the companies, it's not the governments, it's your resource, and there's rents paid, but it's yours. The government today doesn't get what you should get. Because we don't even get the West Texas price, actually. We get something less than that, Bill. We get a Western Canadian select grade, sometimes a West Texas price, and it's always less than the world price. One of the reasons, one of the big factors in all of this is because we don't get enough Western Canadian oil to tidewater. We don't get it to the coasts where we could get that world price. And in any given year, it could cost the Treasury, it could cost you as the owners of the resource, $300 million. It could cost our energy sector $3 billion that they're deprived of from reinvesting or maybe paying dividends if you got shares. What the companies will do with it is obviously their business. This is a real cost to all of you. And so that's why pipelines are in our interest. We want to add more value here. We do in Regina. The upgrader happens in Lloyd. We want to see more of this happen across the prairies, but we'll always be exporting the raw product, crude and bitumen, and we need to do it. It's even in interest for us to have Alberta do it because, again, it shrinks the differential and generates more income for us to lower taxes or pay down debt or invest in healthcare and education and infrastructure in the province. So along comes Energy East. To me, the least controversial of all the pipelines. I get the controversy around Gateway. I don't understand the controversy around Keystone, but I get the politics. I don't understand what's happened with Energy East. With a couple of provinces in the Federation weighing in and saying there needs to be some sort of overlay of analysis, and I've talked to both of them. They're saying they're not putting up conditions, but it kind of looks like conditions to me for them to kind of be on board with Energy East. Ladies and gentlemen, Energy East is the largest pipeline proposal in the history of Canada. $12 billion, the largest one in 50 years, I should say. $12 billion in investment. It'll carry 1.1 million barrels of crude oil and other products, some diluted bitumen, but crude, conventional oil from Alberta and your Saskatchewan. It'll take it to refineries in Eastern Canada where we can add value to it in our country. It'll carry light, sweet crude from the Bakken Formation, a portion of it. It'll result in a major investment in Moosomin, which will be an on-ramp for our oil to get into the pipeline. TransCanada is participating in the National Energy Board process to approve the pipeline. And this is, by the way, the nationally prescribed and mandated process for pipelines to be approved, and so it should be. That a federal government would say, here's the process that you need to work through. Here are the measures. You need to hit these. We need to know about environmental safety. We need to know about safety in general. We ask all the questions on behalf of First Nations communities affected and other communities affected along the way. And they're going through that process. TransCanada, as a result, has already consulted with 500 communities. They've held 80 open houses. Discussions have been already held with 155 First Nations and Métis communities. They've met with 5,500 landowners. The process is underway. Whether they're approved or not is, I guess, still subject to debate. But the national process is weighing in on it. And yet today, now, we have my colleague, Premier Prentice, in Quebec and Ontario, trying to advocate, trying to get provinces who technically don't have standing on the issue to be on side to support this. What else can I tell you about Energy East? It's mostly a conversion. It's 2/3 a conversion of an existing pipeline. It's 1/3 a new pipeline. I've shared with Premier Wynne the fact that for most of Ontario, and I think it's for the entire portion of Ontario as part of the pipeline, it's already there. There's a pipeline today under the feet of Ontarians that's carrying a hydrocarbon, natural gas. If this is approved, the pipeline underneath their feet will carry a hydrocarbon, oil. That oil will then not be on the rail. And that should be of interest to all of us in Canada as we watched what happened at Lac-Mégantic. Rail can move oil, but a safer way. The imperfect way, but the safest way is a pipeline. Here's something else about the oil in that pipeline, ladies and gentlemen, that should be a great source of pride to you and to all Canadians. It will replace the need for Canada to import foreign oil. Many people in this province, I think, are surprised to learn that we as a country, the nation with the 3rd greatest oil reserves on the earth, actually are net importers of oil because we're not very good at getting Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canada. And so where do we import this oil from today in Canada for refining? Iraq, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, a very heavy grade oil, Norway. Why wouldn't we want to become energy self-sufficient, ladies and gentlemen? As a country, as a people, why wouldn't we be proud of the fact that we are the most responsible producers of oil of all of those countries I mentioned, certainly? Why wouldn't we be proud of that fact and say we ought not to import any foreign oil? Let's be energy independent. Let's replace that foreign oil with Western Canadian oil. And let's have the NEB go through its rigorous process and ask all the questions, but let's not put unnecessary barriers or processes in the way of what should be a national vision for energy security in our country. I've heard arguments on social media. People say, well, we don't want, if the oil comes from the West and some of it's refined for consumption in Atlantic Canada and some of it's shipped, we don't want those oil tankers off the coast of Atlantic Canada. Well, and how is the oil from Iraq getting here? Is it the oil ferry? Is it the... We have to deal in the facts in these issues, ladies and gentlemen. We have to share with our friends what is at stake here. I'll tell you, I've had discussions with interests in Ontario and Quebec about the GHG piece. They want to add some analysis, some GHG analysis with respect to our oil before they might weigh in and say this pipeline's good for Canada, the Energy East pipeline. And I've asked the question, why have I never heard a premier from Ontario or Quebec or the leader of an environmental NGO in either of those provinces ask what is the GHG footprint around heavy oil from Venezuela? What is the GHG or human rights footprint around oil from Saudi Arabia? Why in the world would we hold our own oil in Canada, Western Canadian oil, to a higher standard than we would imported oil from foreign countries? This is the case we need to make. I am concerned about the country. We need to be able to move our products around. I don't want to say to Quebec and Ontario, look, we need a GHG footprint measure on the cars that are coming here. And by the way, you want to talk about the GHG emissions problem. Yeah, the oil sector causes some, but everyone in their cars is, I think, either number one or number two in terms of provision of GHG. We don't want to get into that in this country. I don't want to be able to ask, well, what's the GHG footprint around your steel that's being transported all the way here and used in the construction of major infrastructure projects in the province? It's not how you build a country. And so we have to be free traders and we have to advocate for it, but we have to be prepared to make the case when facts are not being presented as I believe they should be presented, and when the country risks heading in a direction that I don't think it should. Ladies and gentlemen, as a government, we'll work hard to be that voice in a constructive way. We'll be adamant, but we'll provide facts. I encourage all of us to do the same thing on this issue, on trade issues in general, and the issue of grain transportation. Because in this world, the fastest growing economies, and here's why we should have hope about the state of the province. Let me just end with this. In this world today, the fastest growing economies, in Asia principally, they want two things most of all. They want energy security and food security. In that world, I like our chances. Give me $65 West Texas for a while. I like our mid and long-term chances. Give us the vagaries and volatility of potash. In that world, I like our chances. That's what we're the best at. I just got back from India. We can't grow enough lentils for them. I don't think we can grow enough yellow peas for them. We should try, farmers in the room. You should try. We're 25% of their potash purchases. 36% of all of India's imports from Canada come from our province. And we haven't sold them a pound of uranium yet. They buy 2 million pounds of that a year. Not that I'm keeping track. In fact, I can tell you Canada now has a nuclear cooperation agreement with India, like we do with China, where our uranium is starting to move. And like India, like China, I should say, India now is expanding their civilian nuclear fleet. We now have the chance to sell uranium. That's a big part of the reason we were there. And I'm pretty hopeful that in the weeks, months ahead, we're going to see some progress. We're going to see some Saskatchewan yellowcake move into that very dynamic market. And that's crucial. In the China market alone, we know the opening of it could mean $3 billion in sales for our province over the next 10 years. The world wants what we have. The ASEAN region, so Indonesia and the Philippines and Malaysia and Singapore, 44% of all their Canadian imports are from us. They're growing at about 6% GDP in a rough year. Indonesia alone, 44%, again, the number's the same, of all their Canadian imports, that's us. It's fertilizer and food. We're going to focus on the American relationship. That's something the business takes care of, but from a government-to-government perspective, we're going to continue to cultivate the opportunities of Asia. It should cause us all great hope for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, by any economic measure, short and mid and long term, Saskatchewan, your Saskatchewan, this place you've been building for the last little while, is strong. But I think we should have hope for a much more important reason than that. Saskatchewan's greatest strength is today and will ever be its people. And if we remember that, we're going to keep our focus on the reasons for growth in the first place. In October, I received an email from a fellow named Dean Stanley. He wrote to me about his son, Dylan. Dylan's 18 and lives in Regina. He dates a young woman named Carly Nemeth. I hope Carly's okay with that being announced. In October, Dylan was working outside the city and he received a call from Carly. Her grandpa, Robert Hillis, had passed away while harvesting near Siemens, just north of Regina. When he heard about Carly's grandpa, Dylan headed out to the farm to help out with harvest. And it turned out he wasn't the only one, because here's what Dylan wrote to his dad. He said, "Dad, it's amazing to see all the help here. There are 5 combines, 2 semis, 4 grain carts, and a mess of people, local farmers and staff from the Case store who took the time to come and help with harvest." The quote goes on. "The whole community is helping, farmers and families and friends taking the time to miss Thanksgiving to help get the fields done." End quote. Harvest on the Hillis farm was completed on October the 15th. And they said goodbye to Robert Hillis and Siemens on the 16th. In his email, which he's allowed me to share, Dean said, "I just wanted to tell you about these heroes in our province. My son is proud to be a part of this, and I too am very proud to be a part of Saskatchewan." Ladies and gentlemen, the economy will move forward at a different pace from time to time. The growth might slow for a bit, it might speed up, but so long as the spirit that has sustained this province for 100 years is informed by her people, by all of you, then the state of Saskatchewan is strong. Strong because of nature's blessings, providential blessings. Strong because of our values, strong because of our people. Thanks for being here today.